From Alaska to Northern California, logging towns are an iconic part of the Pacific Northwest. Mill towns, log sorts, boom towns, and even the notorious skid roads all have their roots in this historical legacy. In Shelton, Mason County's only incorporated city, the wide streets built to accommodate logging trucks and the active mill at the foot of town are evidence still of these strong timber roots. Even the recently built roundabout is designed with no curb or decorative planters to allow the trucks of raw logs arriving at the mill and taking fresh cut lumber from the mill clear passage across the top. With Mason County's 77th Forest Festival being celebrated this summer, it's a good time to reflect on this distinctive forestry heritage and the Bunyan-sized spirit that still lingers in these communities.
Forest Festival, it was initially meant to kind of bring attention to forest fires and land management, but it also has that other effect of bringing the community together and bringing neighbors that normally wouldn't talk or communicate together in a way that you normally would not see.
I think I'm looking forward to everything coming back and things changing. Times change things, and we instilled a lot of other events into our Forest Festival program, and I would hope to see those continue and celebrate Mason County and our timber strong heritage throughout. But I'm just really excited for things to get back and for us all to be together again.
In 1853, the mighty growth of Douglas firs, Sitka spruce, and western red cedar attracted the first industry to Mason County as M.T. Simmons, Wesley B. Gisnell, and Orrington Cushman built the first water-driven mill on what would become known as Mill Creek. This little enterprise was washed away with floodwaters in the first year, but in true pioneer spirit, it was rebuilt again. Many more water-driven mills were built along Hammersley Inlet and Oakland Bay. Oakland, Arcadia, and Union were busy logging communities by the 1860s. In the mid-1880s, the Satsop Railroad was laid to transport logs out of the forest as the easy-to-reach shoreline timber was dwindling. The railroad terminus was David Shelton's claim at the head of Oakland Bay, now known as Shelton. Other logging railroads followed as logging continued to boom. Stuart Holbrook's Green Commonwealth in 1945 recounts the enthusiastic 4th of July celebrations held in 1887, which included fireworks, a grand ball, a shooting match, a greased pole, and possibly the earliest log rolling contest in the state. Shelton has had a continuous history of logger sports of at least 134 years. Early logging was very labor-intensive. Fallers used two-handled crosscut saws and axes to fall trees. Springboards were inserted to create a platform to avoid the lower part of the trunk that fans out and makes it difficult to drag the felled tree across the forest floor. A wedge cut was axed into the tree to encourage it to fall in a particular direction. The job was finished with the crosscut saw. Teams of oxen dragged the logs over greased timbers known as a skid road. Simpson Logging Company in Shelton was started by Sol Simpson in the 1890s. The Simpson Logging Company had logging camps throughout Mason County. Simpson connected camps by transporting logs by steam locomotives. 1887 was also the year that Saul G. Simpson began building and managing the Puget Sound and Grays Harbor Railroad out of Old Camilchi. He was contracted by Captain Renton to do this work and to provide logs to the Port Blakely Mill. It was here that Simpson introduced horse teams to transport the felled logs to the railroad lines. Previously on the West Coast, oxen teams were used to do the heavy hauling. Simpson also introduced the steam-driven donkey engine for yarding to Puget Sound. By the late 1890s, Simpson joined forces with lumberman and legislator A.H. Anderson, also known as the Tall Fir of Mason County, in consolidating the railroads and logging interests in Mason County. In stature and appetite, Anderson had been characterized as a real-life Paul Bunyan. Purportedly, his great height prompted the Shelton Hotel to install an oversized tub and bed for the distinguished guest. Like the Paul Bunyan story of eating exceptionally substantial breakfasts, a fellow logger recalled that for breakfast, Anderson liked a fairly thick beefsteak about 1 foot long, a quart of coffee, and if he wasn't really hungry, 10 eggs. Simpson and Anderson were long-seeing capitalists, unlike other companies of Puget Sound who would sell off their logged lands or let them go into tax arrears. Simpson and Anderson held on to their denuded tenures. They understood the importance of land and the possibility of future logging opportunities. Today, Simpson's descendants, the Reed family, own 1.37 million acres of land across California, Oregon, and Washington, making them the fifth largest private landowners in the U.S. Strangely, it wasn't until the 1920s that Shelton became part of the manufacturing side of forestry. Previously, Shelton's timbers had been shipped out to be milled into lumber at other locales, such as McCleary, Seattle, Tacoma, and Port Blakely, Gamble, and Ludlow. Simpson's son-in-law, Mark Reed, led the Simpson Logging Company in this new manufacturing age after Saul Simpson's retirement. In 1924, the Simpsons Logging Company began construction of a power plant and the Reed Mill Company in Shelton. The Reed Mill focused on milling western hemlock and supplying material for the fledgling Rainier Pulp and Paper Company. Although logging was primarily about getting the wood, pulp and paper products emerged as important industries to Mason County. Further advances in research in 1931 by the scientists of Rainier and DuPont discovered methods of taking the cellulose from western hemlocks and converting it into a fiber, which could be formed into a wood-based plastic known as cellophane, and could be spun into the revolutionary new fabric, rayon. Although the acids used in the early process were environmentally damaging and a major safety concern for workers, this technology was revolutionary. As silk and cotton became scarce during the war, rayon was important for parachute manufacture, clothing, and bandages. Rainier called this pulp material Rayoneer, combining rayon and Mount Rainier. Rebranding began in the 1940s, which saw reforested timber leases as crops to be harvested by future generations. Now pulp and cellulose products were processed into a huge companion industry. Logging was no longer a one-shot extricative process, and trees used for pulp and cellulose products did not have to be tight-grained, old-growth lumber. However, these crops faced an ancient threat. Throughout the Pacific Northwest, this timber history has been shadowed by the flickering presence of forest fires. The fires of 1847 and 1902 were devastating years for Washington and Oregon. The 1902 fires destroyed logging camps, sawmills, rail cars, and many homes in Mason County. The rest of western Washington and Oregon did not fare so well in 1902, with many lives lost. Fire was not only a threat to homes, but it was also a threat to livelihoods as they ravaged stands of trees.
In Mason County, so we cover approximately just over 1,000 square miles. We're surrounded by mountains and forest lands up here, national state parks. We have a lot of greenery up here and a great recreational area for Mason County residents and residents outside even Mason County that come in and visit quite often. The way we keep that nice and green and open for people to come and keep recreating is through fire safety in Mason County. And so a lot of times we need people to come in and be safe with both campfires, fireworks when they come in the area. Campfires is a big one where we see a lot of human-caused fires throughout the year. And so being safe with your campfires while you're there, be in attendance with your campfires at all times. Make sure that when you're done at the end of your camping trip or the end of the day, that you're using water, extinguishing that fire, making sure that it's nice and cold and out before you leave. As well as when you come down here for 4th of July, New Year's times, any fireworks, things like that, they're using safe and sane fireworks. The government puts out a lot of information on fireworks and how to use them properly and how to be safe with them as well so that we're not causing any extra forest fires or things in Mason County.
In response to the devastating Tillamook fires of the 1930s, Washington Governor Clarence D. Martin campaigned for citizen participation in stopping forest fires before they start. Governor Martin, the Weyerhaeuser Timber Company, and others developed the Keep Washington Green Association in 1940, a model for fire prevention that was later adopted by other states. Youth groups were an extremely popular part of this association. The Junior Forest Wardens, run by the American Legion, educated youths about fire prevention and reforestation techniques through tree planting. During the late 1940s, forest fire prevention became important for another reason. The Second World War was in full gear, and there was a very real fear of a Japanese attack on the continental U.S. As the war effort relied upon wood products for a variety of purpose, the possibility of an enemy-started forest fire could have paramount effect. The first Forest Festival was held in May of 1945 in this era of change. Science and research were replacing the brute strength and shrewd ability of the lumbermen of old. As the forest industry branched off into rebranding cut blocks into crops and board feet in terms of cellulose products, a celebration of the history of timber extraction and the continued future of the second growth, a carefully managed sustainment of the Shelton economy, was held. Mason County Forest Festival. The first Forest Festival promoted forest fire protection and the regeneration of the plantation forests of the Shelton Working Group. In October of 1946, Forest Festival was formally incorporated as a nonprofit organization with the specific focus of the development of a public consciousness of the need of forest fire prevention and an appreciation of the growing forests of Washington. The original sponsors included Simpson, the Shelton Chamber of Commerce, the U.S. Forest Service, and Rayonier. Following that first festival, in which Lois Gibbler was crowned Forest Festival Queen and Gus Anderson played the part of Paul Bunyan, the event only grew. People from the northwestern Washington region flocked to Shelton to see, in the words of an ad for the 12th annual Forest Festival, the dramatic forest pageant, the thrilling parade, and the exciting contests in which loggers demonstrate their skills at falling, bucking, tree topping, and truck driving. For 3 memorable days, the communities participate in a program which you can't afford to miss. The idea of a forest festival quickly spread across the country, along with the Keep Green program. You have in Shelton, in my opinion, the best all-around forest festival in the United States, read a quote from the mid-1950s. It has been the inspiration of many forest communities through the U.S.
There's the princesses, which there's 2 princesses now, and they kind of go around and just tell the community about Forest Festival, and there's also the queen, so they kind of all have the same duties in the royalty court, and they just kind of share the joy of being on court. When you go to other towns for parades, you get to meet the other royalty courts, and you experience what their kind of town culture is like, and you tell them about Shelton. You can tell people at their parades about Shelton, and it kind of helps drive tourism for Shelton, and it'll have people coming here on vacation or coming here to our Forest Festival, and driving those tourist attractions that we have helps build commerce in the town and the community, as well as it just helps people get the word out about Shelton, because we are a small town, so it does help.
The 9th annual Forest Festival in 1953 was one for the ages. The monumental event celebrated the 100th anniversary of logging operations in Mason County, and a large sign carved into a piece of Douglas fir was permanently dedicated. On the festival's final day, 30,000 people, about 6 times the regular population of the town, crowded into Shelton to watch the Paul Bunyan Parade through downtown. The 1953 event was an early high point for the festival, but there have been many other great moments throughout the years.
I would say my favorite part was just seeing the smile on all of the kids' faces. It is the best thing in the world when you wave at a kid and you just know it made their day, because the queen waved at them and their face just lights up. And I always loved going into the middle school and the elementary schools and like reading stories, and just spending time with the youth is amazing. The reason I joined Forest Festival is because when I was in kindergarten, I went to the parade, and the queen at the time stopped and waved at me, and I was like, I want to be her someday. Like, I want to be the queen of the forest someday. And I just worked and did community service growing up and got well-rounded, and then tried out, and it was probably the best day of my life when I got crowned. It was just so much fun. So much fun. Definitely a great experience. I recommend everyone trying out, even if you don't think that you're like I could wear a crown, or I could be queen or a princess. Just try out and do it, because it's just a good experience to have, like the community experience, talking on a stage, talking with a microphone, being able to present yourself in an interview. You do a formal interview, and that's helped me in interviews for job positions and my college interview. So it just kind of builds you for your future.
I think the best part about being the queen is getting to walk around and see all the little kids' faces when you're in your attire and with my big crown. During our float reveal on June 4th, afterwards we were walking around and this little girl came up to me and gave me the biggest hug and told me that she wanted to be like me one day, and it was just the most heartfelt and sincere thing I'd ever felt. When a little kid compliments you, it is the most sincere thing ever, and it makes me feel so good. So I think honestly, getting to be an inspiration for little kids is the best thing about being queen.
The forest is now an important resource for tourism and recreation. The legacy of the lumbering past, however, is still felt when you notice the street signs in downtown Shelton. Pine, alder, cedar, grove, poplar, oak, hazel, walnut, hemlock, and West Birch Street, to name a few. Or when you pass Tolly on Main Street with her car piled high with logs. Or if you stop at the post office and view the original 1940 New Deal mural of an oxen team hauling logs on a skid row by Richard Haynes. Or if you attend the ever-living and breathing event that is Forest Festival. Cheer on the giant statues of Paul Bunyan and Babe, and salute the royalty court as they pass by in the parade. Forestry is an ever-present part of Shelton and Mason County, and its history is worth remembering and celebrating.